Callen Drex had everything: a thriving career, a dream wife, and the perfect honeymoon planned. Soraya Elwin only wanted to start her married life in peace. But when Callen vanished without a trace, and Soraya was found bloodied and disoriented, suspicion fell fast. As Detective Nora Silas dug deeper, she uncovered a web spun by Carven and Tera Volin, where love was a cover. Loyalty was a lie, and the honeymoon was never meant to be a celebration, but a setup for murder. Callen Drex and Soraya Elwin had planned their wedding for over a year. Every detail was curated to perfection, from the white roses in her bouquet to the ocean blue ties worn by the groomsmen. Their story had always felt like a movie. He was a marine biologist who had traveled across continents researching coral reefs. She was a soft-spoken but fiercely talented graphic designer whose art had appeared in several eco-magazines. They met at a fundraiser, bonded over sustainability, and fell in love at a pace that surprised everyone except themselves. The ceremony took place in a quiet, seaside chapel surrounded by only close friends and family. It was intimate, beautiful, and sincere. Callen couldn't stop smiling the entire day. Soraya, normally reserved, looked radiant and at ease. Everyone agreed they were meant to be. They chose Belize for their honeymoon, a remote eco-resort, known for privacy, luxury, and natural beauty. Their villa overlooked the turquoise sea, tucked away between palm trees and white sand. Days were spent swimming in clear lagoons, exploring hidden waterfalls, and laughing over seafood dinners under starlit skies. There was no sign of anything dark or broken between them. Even the resort staff noticed how affectionate they were. Callen constantly taking photos of Soraya sketching the waves while waiting for him to return from brief dives. On the 6th evening, the couple attended a beach bonfire organized by the resort. It was a calm night. Photos show them dancing barefoot, drinks in hand, surrounded by soft music and glowing torches. Around midnight, they returned to their villa. It was the last time Callen was seen alive. At 5:47 a.m., a housekeeper spotted Soraya walking alone outside the resort, barefoot and disoriented. She was crying, her nightgown soaked in blood, her hands trembling. The woman called security. Within minutes, emergency services and local authorities arrived. Soraya was taken into medical care, but could barely speak. Her pupils were dilated, her pulse erratic. Tests revealed no alcohol or narcotics in her system. The villa she and Callen shared was locked from the inside. When staff opened the door, they were met with a chilling scene. The living area was trashed glass from a shattered wine bottle covered the floor, the dining chairs knocked over. In the bedroom, blood was smeared across the bedsheets and along the floor leading to the back entrance. There were no signs of forced entry, no footprints besides Callen and Soraya's. His suitcase was still packed. His phone, passport, and wallet were found in the bathroom. But Callen himself had vanished. The news reached their families within hours. Investigators questioned the resort staff, scoured the premises, and searched the nearby shoreline. Drones scanned the surrounding jungle. Divers swept the ocean just offshore. But no body was found. The only thing discovered was Callen's watch, cracked and half buried in the sand behind the villa. Soraya remained in the hospital for 48 hours. When stable, she was transferred to a local police facility. She gave a vague account of the night, saying they had returned from the bonfire, talked for a while, then went to bed. She remembered waking up outside. Everything else was a blur. She denied harming Callen. She couldn't explain the blood on her or why the villa looked like a crime scene. The lack of solid evidence frustrated investigators. There were no security cameras near the villa due to resort policy, and a storm the night before had knocked out part of the resort's electrical grid. What little CCTV existed was dark during the key hours. With no eyewitnesses and no body, suspicion naturally fell on Soraya. Her emotional state was interpreted as guilt. Whispers began. Had she snapped in a fit of rage? Had the honeymoon gone wrong in some unspeakable way? The media descended quickly. Headlines labeled her as the vanishing bride. Some outlets speculated she killed Callen and disposed of the body in the sea. Others painted her as a traumatized woman caught in a nightmare. But beneath the noise and uncertainty, one truth lingered quietly. Someone knew what happened that night, and they were counting on Soraya being too broken to remember. Soray. Elwin sat in a small, windowless interview room inside the Belize City Police Department. A pale fluorescent light buzzed above her, flickering slightly. Her hands were wrapped tightly around a cup of cold water she hadn't touched. Across from her, a local detective quietly observed her, taking notes. The image that had spread across media networks worldwide of a young bride covered in blood, staring blankly into the distance, had already burned itself into the public's memory. She had become the center of an international mystery. With Callen Drex still missing and no suspects named, the world demanded answers. Most believed those answers rested with Soraya. As the investigation unfolded, authorities began to uncover details that cast doubt on the perfect image the couple had projected. Soraya's claim of remembering nothing beyond returning from the beach party didn't align with the violent scene found in the villa. Her bruises and the deep scratches on her arm appeared to be defensive, but they could also be from a struggle with someone else or even self-inflicted. The ambiguity only deepened the suspicion. Detective Nora Silas, recently assigned to assist with the case, wasn't convinced of Soraya's guilt but needed more. She requested Soraya's travel logs, credit card records, and digital devices. That's when a strange discovery shifted the direction of the investigation. Soraya had flown into Belize 2 full days before Callen. Yet, in her statement, she'd claimed they had arrived together. When confronted with this detail, Soraya looked genuinely confused. She didn't deny it but offered no explanation. She simply said she didn't remember changing her flight. Investigators reviewed the resort's guest entry records. Soraya had checked in using her maiden name, Elwin, under a solo reservation. She had been seen dining alone, walking the resort trails, and even speaking with staff in fluent Spanish, which she had never mentioned knowing. It painted a very different picture from the one she'd presented as a newlywed. The media seized. On the new timeline, rumors surged. Why would a bride fly out early without her husband? Was she meeting someone else? Was there tension between her and Callen before the trip? As the pressure mounted, so did the public's belief that Soraya was hiding something terrible. Back in the resort, forensics teams continued combing the villa. They discovered blood spatter not just in the bedroom but also outside on the rear deck. It suggested that Callen may have fled or been dragged outside. A few broken wood panels beneath the deck hinted that someone may have slipped through or hidden there. As the theory of a premeditated act grew, Nora Silas focused on Soraya's background. Her childhood was quiet, her record clean. But in college, she had briefly dated a man who later filed a restraining order. It had been dismissed, but the record existed. It was enough to feed the narrative that perhaps Soraya had a hidden, violent streak. But then something didn't add up. While reviewing security footage from nearby areas unaffected by the power outage, a blurry video surfaced. Around 3:30 after the time Soraya was supposedly unconscious, an unidentified figure was seen walking toward the beach from the forested path behind the resort. The figure carried what looked like a duffel bag and walked with a limp. The face wasn't visible, but the build was clearly not Soraya's. It was a man. This figure had never checked into the resort. There were no footprints matching him found. Initially because the tide had come in that morning, washing most of the beach clean. But one detail stood out. The person had been wearing boots, not resort sandals, not casual beach shoes, but hiking boots. Detective Silas requested a full staff list and guest registry once more. She started to wonder if the answer wasn't in Soraya's memory, but in someone else's silence. Someone had entered that villa, or was already there. And if Soraya wasn't the one who committed the crime, then she may have been the real target all along. Detective Nora Silas shifted her focus to the people closest to Callen Drex. The couple had no history of domestic violence, no ongoing family disputes, and no recorded mental health issues. It was a clean slate, too clean. But one name began to surface repeatedly during the review of Callen's professional and personal life. Miles Carven, his best friend and business partner. Miles had been part of Callen's marine research company since the beginning. Together, they had built a reputable consulting firm specializing in oceanic preservation and ecotourism planning. Publicly, they were seen as a seamless team, but recent documents suggested otherwise. In the months before Callen's wedding, financial inconsistencies had begun to appear in the company's accounts. Untraceable transfers, sudden withdrawals. Callen's private emails to their accountant, retrieved from his cloud backup, revealed concern. He suspected Miles was stealing money. These emails had been written days before Callen's honeymoon. Further investigation showed that Miles had quietly flown into Belize 3 days after Callen's disappearance. He claimed it was to support the investigation, but he never contacted the police or Soraya. Instead, he stayed at a different hotel on the opposite side of the island and avoided all media interaction. When detectives questioned him, he presented himself as shocked and saddened. He denied any involvement and insisted he and Callen had resolved a minor disagreement before the wedding, but his story quickly unraveled. Security logs revealed that Miles had been in Belize a month prior under a different name. He had used a fake ID to check into a modest guest house near the resort where Callen and Soraya would later stay. Surveillance showed him scouting the resort from a distance. When questioned, Miles claimed it was for business expansion. But the company had no plans in Belize. The most disturbing discovery came from a recovered hard drive found in Callen's laptop bag. Within an encrypted folder, forensic experts found documents related to the company's internal audit. Callen had compiled a full report of Miles's embezzlement, nearly $240,000 siphoned over 2 years. The folder also contained a scanned legal draft, an unsigned termination letter addressed to Miles, and a scheduled meeting plan titled, "Discuss Future Belize." It became clear that Callen intended to confront Miles during the honeymoon. Perhaps he thought the privacy would give them space to resolve things quietly. Or perhaps he underestimated just how far Miles would go to protect himself. Meanwhile, more troubling clues emerged from the resort's internal network. An access point on the resort's Wi-Fi had been pinned during the hours of Callen's disappearance from outside the perimeter near the forest edge. The device used had a MAC address that matched a burner phone later found discarded in a ditch outside town. That phone contained one saved contact, Tera Volin. Tera was a 24-year-old employee who had worked at the resort for over a year. She had always kept a low profile, mostly assigned to night shifts in housekeeping. A background check showed she had no criminal record, but further digging revealed something odd. 2 years ago, she had lived in the same city as Miles Carven. When authorities attempted to question her, she had already quit and vanished. Her resignation email, sent at 3:15 a.m., was flagged as suspicious. Investigators tracked her movements and discovered she had booked passage on a private boat headed for a remote village. She was caught at the port with 2 fake passports and a backpack containing $9,400 in cash. The connection between Miles and Tera was undeniable. They had planned something more than financial fraud. As Tera sat in custody, refusing to speak, Detective Silas could sense the pieces were converging. This wasn't just about a man vanishing on his honeymoon. It was about betrayal, greed, and a plan that had been in motion long before Callen and Soraya said, "I do." A week after Callen Drex's disappearance, a group of local children were playing near a quiet, undeveloped section of beach about half a mile from the resort. It was an area mostly ignored by tourists, overgrown, rocky, and littered with driftwood. One of the children, digging into the sand with a piece of broken shell, felt something solid underneath. At first, it seemed like a piece of driftwood, but then the shape revealed itself: Callen's hand, partially decomposed, reaching upward as if trying to escape. The police sealed off the area immediately. Forensics confirmed what many already feared: Callen Drex was dead. He had suffered a single powerful blow to the head from a blunt object, likely causing instant unconsciousness. But the cause of death wasn't the trauma alone, it was suffocation. He had been buried alive. The medical examiner found sand lodged deep in his airways. The time of death coincided almost perfectly with the night he disappeared. Strangely, despite the warm climate, his body showed delayed decomposition. Investigators quickly realized this meant Callen had likely been stored somewhere cold before being buried. Attention turned again to the hiking trails behind the resort. A search party was dispatched to an abandoned ranger cabin located deep within the nearby jungle. The cabin, used years earlier as a wildlife observation point, was now in ruins. Inside, police found blood smears on the floor, duct tape, and pieces of black tarp consistent with marks found on Callen's body. It was now clear Callen had not been killed inside the villa. He had been attacked, likely subdued, and transported to this cabin. After some time, his body had been moved and buried under sand during the night, perhaps to delay discovery and confuse the timeline. The final moments of Callen's life were beginning to come into focus, and they were horrifying. Meanwhile, digital forensics began examining a waterlogged smartwatch found near the buried site. It belonged to Callen. Despite being damaged, experts recovered some data. The heart rate sensor showed a sharp increase in BPM around 2:08 a.m., then a sudden flatline. The GPS history confirmed that Callen had been taken to the cabin, held there for several hours, and then moved again. More importantly, a fragment of a deleted audio file was recovered, just 3 seconds long. A voice, male, clearly whispering, "You shouldn't have brought her." The voice matched samples later taken from Miles Carven. Detective Nora Silas had everything she needed to arrest Miles, but he had already disappeared. His phone was switched off, and his hotel room had been cleared out 2 days earlier. A BOLA was issued across all exit points. Then, 2 days later, airport security flagged a man trying to board a private charter jet under the name Daniel Merrill. The fake passport was convincing, but not enough to fool the system. Miles was arrested without incident. But the arrogance he showed in the interrogation room was chilling. He didn't deny knowing Callen was dead. Instead, he claimed he had nothing to do with the act itself. According to him, it was all Tera's doing. He said she had gone too far, that he only intended to confront Callen, not kill him. But that didn't match the evidence. Tera Volin, still in custody, had finally begun to talk. Her story painted a very different picture. She admitted to being in a romantic relationship with Miles for over a year. He promised her a new life, money, freedom, escape. But he said the only way to secure it was to clean up the company. And Callen was the obstacle. Miles had lured Tera into a conspiracy, help him remove Callen, and she'd get a cut of the stolen money. They planned to frame Soraya. After all, she had a faint history of mental health claims and had been under stress. They would drug her, stage a fight, and leak selective evidence to make it look like a jealous breakdown. But the plan failed. Soraya didn't fully lose consciousness. She stumbled out, creating panic and attention they didn't plan for. In the confusion, they buried Callen in a rush, hoping his body wouldn't be found. Their mistake? underestimating the tide, the children, and the data trapped inside a broken watch. Tera Volin's confession opened the final door in the investigation, but there were still lingering questions that troubled Detective Nora Silas, chief among them. Why had Soraya flown out early, checked into the resort under her maiden name, and behaved in ways she later claimed not to remember? Was it trauma-induced memory loss, or had Soraya unknowingly walked into a trap carefully laid well before the honeymoon began? Further investigation into Soraya's early arrival revealed something chilling. Security footage from a hotel in Belize City, 2 days before Callen's scheduled arrival, showed Soraya being escorted into a room by a man wearing a hat and sunglasses. His face was mostly obscured, but later image enhancement showed a distinctive tattoo on his wrist, matching a known associate of Carven's from back in their university days. It became clear that Soraya had been drugged and manipulated even before the honeymoon officially started. According to hotel staff, she had seemed off during her stay, quiet, anxious, and confused. They assumed she was jet-lagged. One witness even said she asked, "Have I already checked in?" As if she couldn't recall the last few hours. Medical experts were brought in to analyze Soraya's blood work from the day she was found wandering the beach. Though most substances had cleared her system by then, trace levels of scopolamine, powerful drug known to impair memory and induce suggestibility, were detected. The drug isn't widely used in clinical settings anymore, but it is notorious in criminal circles for its ability to leave victims disoriented and highly vulnerable to influence. This discovery vindicated Soraya. She had been a pawn used not only as a scapegoat but as a distraction. Miles and Tera had crafted a plan so elaborate it depended on Soraya becoming the unreliable narrator of her own trauma. During Carven's trial, the prosecution laid out the full timeline. He had orchestrated everything: the money laundering, the staged affair, the drugging, the violent execution. His motive was both financial and personal. Emails recovered from his private server showed growing resentment toward Callen, whom he viewed as a moral superior who always got credit and admiration. Miles didn't just want the money. He wanted to erase Callen and take his place, not just in business, but in the public image he had always envied. Tera Volin, though remorseful, was deeply complicit. She had helped drug Soraya, entered the villa under the cover of darkness, and assisted in transporting Callen's unconscious body to the jungle. She was the one who buried him beneath the sand, believing it was a necessary evil for a better life. In court, she wept and claimed she never intended for anyone to die. The jury didn't buy it. Both were convicted. Miles received life without parole. Tera was sentenced to 25 years. The courtroom was packed the day of the verdict, and Soraya, Elwin, now living in seclusion under psychological care, did not attend. Her lawyers released a statement on her behalf, thanking the investigators but requesting privacy as she began the long, painful process of healing. The case sparked international debate on the vulnerability of women in foreign justice systems, the misuse of psychological manipulation in criminal acts, and the ease with which innocence can be twisted into suspicion when the right clues are planted. Soraya's story became a chilling reminder of how fast perception can shift and how justice, while often slow, can still uncover truth buried in sand. Years later, a documentary team attempted to contact Soraya for an exclusive interview. She declined. Friends say she now lives near the sea in a different country, painting again, but rarely speaking of the past. What began as a honeymoon turned into a staged nightmare. And while Soraya wasn't the killer, she would carry the weight of that night forever, not because of what she did, but because of what was done to her in silence, in shadows, and the name of greed.